And joining us today in our Book Talk segment, great to welcome Roman has written a very interesting novel, kind of a historical novel. It's called The Girl Who Came Home, a novel of the Titanic. We're joined today by Hazel Gaynor from over in Ireland today. That's our Hazel. You're the furthest person away that we've talked to, so good to have you with us.
Thanks so much. It's great to be on the show.
Had a chance to start the book. I don't like to finish novels before I interview the author because I don't want to give anything away, but I'm enjoying it so far, and as we kind of touched on a little bit before we went on, it's an historical novel, and I guess the anniversary of the Titanic, that's coming up, or actually right now, isn't it, earlier this month?
That's right, yeah. The 102nd anniversary was last week, the 14th of April, and into the early hours of the morning. Titanic sank at 2:20 in the morning of the 15th of April. So, yeah, we're just past the anniversary. And actually, it's amazing to think that even a week and a bit on, the survivors were still recovering in hospital in New York, and I think that's, it's part of the novel, the survivor story and that experience. But it's amazing when you think about that they were still dealing with this ordeal, for days, weeks, months, years afterwards.
And when you think about over 100 years ago, this happened. The media back then was just newspapers, but it was a story that the whole world pretty much knew about then, and it still resonates today. I guess I know that movie a few years ago kind of brought it back, but there have been a couple of movies made about it. I guess one in the 50s and then one about 10 or 15 years ago. But this is a story still people find interesting, right?
It is, yeah, and absolutely, as you say, we're talking about 1912, so really media was just in its infancy in many ways, but interestingly, the first movie about Titanic was made just a month after the sinking, and it actually starred a big-name actress at the time, Dorothy Gibson, who was on Titanic in Spies, and she wore the dress that she had worn that evening on the Titanic and recreated those scenes. So we've gone through several different periods of looking at Titanic again. There was the Walter Lord's account, which is many people's favourite movie, I think, A Night to Remember.
Right.
And obviously the wreck was discovered in 1985 by Robert Ballard. Then we had the James Cameron epic in, I think that was 97, 98. So, yeah, we've seen lots of different sides, I suppose, and versions of Titanic, but I particularly felt that we hadn't seen as much about the third-class passengers, the poorer passengers who had travelled on Titanic. The media tended to grab the headlines at the time of the very wealthy American millionaires and socialites who were lost or who had survived, and I suppose, social status dictated at the time, people really weren't that interested in the steerage passengers, of whom there were the majority of the passengers on Titanic. So I started researching that side of the story, the third-class passengers, and particularly living, as I do now, in Ireland, I wanted to find a story of an Irish survivor who had left from Titanic's last port of call, actually, which was Queenstown in County Cork. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, we just seem to be continually fascinated and discovering, something new about the Titanic to talk about after all these years. It's I think just the human tragedy, it's one of those events we just are continually fascinated by and wonder what we would have done in that circumstance.
It's a good point that you don't think of the like you said, the steerage passengers. You always think on cruises, particularly back then, where pretty much only wealthy people could do it for vacation or for pleasure. Yeah. The steerage people, a lot of them were just coming over to America to come to a new land, right?
Absolutely, and particularly from Ireland, most of the passengers stepping onto Titanic in Ireland, they weren't really concerned about the magnificence of this much-talked-about ship of dreams. This was a very sad occasion for them. They were leaving behind family and friends, and they were setting off in hope of a new life in America. And as you say, unlike the very wealthy, who were really just sailing on this maiden voyage in order to say they had sailed on this incredible ship. This was very much a sort of a passing interest and a holiday to them to a degree. But yeah, the third class, the steerage, I felt had really been overlooked. So through my character of Maggie Murphy, her aunt, and the 12 others that she sailed with from her parish, I'm hopefully going to give readers a slightly different perspective and a different sensation of what that epic journey would have been been like for those people.
And your story kind of takes place in two different time frames, too, right? Back in 1912, and then you also jump to the future a little bit.
Yeah, so we meet Maggie firstly when she's a 17-year-old girl in 1912, on the morning that her and the 13 others she's travelling with are leaving their homes and travelling down to Queenstown to board Titanic. And a lot of the book is written in first-person point of view, so you really feel like, hopefully you feel like you're really there on the ship with Maggie. And then sections of the book are written in 1982, so we get to see Maggie as an elderly lady, and in those sections of the book, she's finally coming to terms in a way and able to talk about Titanic with her great-granddaughter Grace. And again, it was that survivor trauma that I wanted to explore, because, you know, so many who survived just found it impossible to talk about or to come to terms with what had happened to them. So by allowing Maggie to speak as an elderly lady, I wanted to show that side of the event. So yeah, we see two different time periods, and obviously we get to see how Maggie had dealt with this and how it's affected her life in the intervening years.
When you do a book like this, Hazel, obviously there's history involved in it, and you're also making up, creating a story to go around it. Do you still have to do a lot of research to kind of, you know, keep it as accurate as you can, as far as maybe, you know, sites and descriptions, that kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, you know, historical fiction, it does come with that extra challenge of trying to be, you know, authentic to the historical event, the period, the people, but also remembering that you're telling a story. So this is fiction, although my characters were very much based on a group of a true story of 14 people who did leave their homes in Ireland. But I wanted the freedom, if you like, to create my own version of their life and how they interpreted those events. But huge amounts of research, and you know, for a debut novel, some people thought I was crazy to try and even tackle Titanic, because it is such a global, well-known event. You know, there are so many experts, and I was worried, you know, that I would do justice to the event, and being very mindful. You know, there are still descendants. It's 102 years. It's not that long ago. But there is a vast amount of information available online. You know, as you said at the beginning, there was a lot of newspaper interest. This was a hugely reported global event. So almost too much information, if you like. I think the job was to know when to stop and what not to put into the book as much as what should go into the book. You know, that it didn't become a historical document, but it is a story. And it's been a pleasure to weave the facts and the things we know about Titanic into my created characters and their version of that event.
Well, it's a debut novel, Hazel. Like you said, you tackled a big topic, but it's a great read. I'm not finished with it yet, but I'm looking forward to doing that. And it almost reads as if it's actually happened to somebody. It may have. Who knows? Maybe there was somebody on that went through this. But it's a great story nonetheless, called The Girl Who Came Home, a novel of the Titanic. And Hazel, do you have a website? People can contact you and get the book? I
do indeed, yeah. My website is www.hazelgaynor.com. It's Gaynor is my surname. And there's all the social media links if anyone's on Twitter or Facebook. I have a Facebook page, so lots of content about, obviously, it's not only the book, but the background to the real story behind the book, and lots of information there for people who are interested in Titanic, and anyone who's generally just interested in writing or reading. I try and keep it quite current, so hopefully something for everybody on there as well.
Great. Hazel, appreciate talking to you for a few minutes. And again, please let us know when your next project comes out. I'd love to have you back on again. But thanks for joining us today.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.